Hey everybody, and welcome to my definitive top 10 games of 2022. Now I did release a preliminary top 10 at the end of the year, but I've played so many games since then, so that list has changed quite significantly. Now I have excluded any reprints, and I've also excluded one particular game because on Board Game Geek, and that is the criteria that I'm using to date these games, Millefiori was dated to 2021, but if that wasn't dated 2021, it would probably be on this list. So the reprints that I've excluded are like Get On Board, which was the reprint of Let's Make a Bus Route, as well as the Stefan Feld collection reprints like Hamburg and Amsterdam. But we've still got 10 fantastic games here, and after I'm done with the top 10, I will run through my top 20, or my 11 to 20, just to give you an idea about what just missed out. Now before I get started on the 10 games, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games. And if you use the link in my show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 10, I have Caesar Seize Rome in 20 minutes. Now this is a 2-player only area control game by Paolo Mori. Now normally, as you guys know, area control games lend themselves much better to higher player counts, but Caesar does a fantastic job of making it work for 2 players, and mechanically this game is so simple and smooth that I absolutely love it. Now what you're trying to do is you're placing these tokens on this map, but these tokens sit on the border between 2 locations, and the tokens are essentially split in half and will have a number on each of those halves, which is the influence you are putting in to each of those regions. And because the way that these numbers are split is, sometimes has a huge disparity, like it can be a low number with a high number, it can be a balance of the two, and so on. It's all about trying to map things out carefully and get the most you can by each placement. But you have to be very careful about the opportunities you leave to your opponents here, because if you leave an opening for them to close a region off, even if they're not winning it, they can steal these special power tokens, which can give them game-breaking rules, and that can really come back to haunt you. But what a wonderful, deep, elegant game that you can play in 20 minutes with 2 players only. This game is so well put together, and I was left massively impressed. And it really does have that addictive feel to it, at least I feel it does. So that is Caesar Seize Rome in 20 minutes. At number 9, I have another 2-player only game with Wizards of the Grimoire. Now, if you watch my content regularly and you know my tastes in games, you'll probably know that I'm a Eurogamer through and through, and this being a card-driven, back and forth dueling game, it might seem alien that I rate it so highly, and it really is. I was not expecting to like this game so much, but there is something very special about this one. The way that you can synergize these cards together, exploit weaknesses in your opponent's engine they're building, it's just great. And I love the turn structure in this game. It is so simple. You're just drafting from a communal deck of cards. You're drawing mana cards, and then you're powering up these cards. And I love the cooldown system as well, where your better spells take longer to recharge. But there are, of course, little tricks and twists you can use to speed that process up and slow your opponent's tricks down, and all these things going on here. And it's all about trying to kind of be a bit dynamic in knowing what's working, knowing when to switch spells in and out. And it's just such a well put together game that is very dynamic, very interesting. And I've had some fantastic down to the wire games of this one, which have just been some of the most engaging experiences I've had in the last year. So one that completely caught me off guard, and one that I'd highly recommend you cast your eye over, even if you don't like dueling games and you like those kind of more deterministic Euro mechanisms. This one is probably one you're still going to enjoy. So that is Wizards of the Grimoire at number 9. At number 8, I have A Long Shot, the dice game. So this is a racing game as you are buying horses and you're bidding on horses as well. And you have tons of things you can do through this roll and write mechanism, where you're rolling a couple of dice each turn. You're ticking things off on your player sheet to bet on horses, to mess with other horses as well by pushing them forward or pulling them backwards, and buying horses. If you get a podium finish, you're getting more money. And what a fun and well scalable game this is. This works well from, say, 2 players all the way up to 8 players. It really is such an engaging and fun experience. And I was I recall watching this on the on the crowdfunding platform it was on. I think it was Kickstarter, and I bypassed it because I thought, you know what, I've got racing games and I don't really need another one. And I remember playing this at a convention and just immediately knowing that I had to have it in my own collection. And since then, I've not looked back. I get this to the table regularly. It's a great, again, high player count game, and it's just an absolute ruckus time, and I'd highly recommend it. And I've never really seen anybody who's not enjoyed it, because it is just a great fun experience you can play in 15 to 20 minutes. So love this one. That is Long Shot, the dice game. At number 7, I have the first Euro on the list. This is Woodcraft by Vladimir Suki. Now, I generally like Suki games. You know, I have a ton of them in my collection. This one I was a little bit more apprehensive about because it is a contract fulfillment style game. And generally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of that because I find it a bit rinse and repeat and a bit predictable. But the way that this game uses dice as resources was fascinating to me, and you know, it even went beyond my imagination how they used that mechanism, because it is so interesting. As you are basically drafting these dice or buying these dice in order to complete these contracts, but you can kind of carve them in half by splitting, say, a 4 die into 2 2s, or even go beyond that and to convert it into a 5 die into a 3, a 1, and a 1, or you can even stick pips onto other dice and so on. So you have so many little things in your toolbox to craft exactly what you need. There's a kind of little margin for error here because you actually don't get that many actions throughout the entirety of the game, and it's all about trying to min-max everything here, because the longer you neglect these contracts, the worse rewards that you'll get as well. So all these little mechanisms come together in a great game. I love the action selection system here. As the longer you neglect actions, the better rewards you get, or kind of sub-rewards. And it just comes together so harmoniously. It's a joy to play. And funnily enough, this is one of my favourite solo games. I'm not a solo gamer at all, but the solo mode in this game is fantastic. Very much bare bones, not much housekeeping or anything like that, and it just works exceptionally. So highly, highly recommend Woodcraft. At number 6, I have Acropolis. Now this is a much lighter tile placement game that, on the face of it, doesn't really do anything new, but there's something about the way this is all put together that just works for me. It's so smooth, as all you're doing is you're drafting these kind of 3 hexes stuck together style tiles, and you're putting them in your own little tableau, you are overlapping them, and all these different kind of buildings on these tiles score in different ways. Like, for example, the blue buildings you want into your biggest group as possible. The orange buildings you want on the extremity of the board. The purple buildings you want surrounded by the other tiles, and so on. But you are not only trying to maximize that puzzle, you're also trying to draft these stars which are on the tiles in order to increase the multipliers, because without stars of the matching colours, then those different scoring options aren't going to score at all. And at the same time, you need to make sure that you have a good flow of these cubes, or these building cubes, because if you don't, then you're always going to be forced to draft the first tile in the row, where as if you cover these kind of neutral spaces on your tiles, then you get more of these cubes, which means you can skip over cubes to get the exact tile that you want. And I love the way that works. It is a great experience that you can play in around 20 minutes. You can play a longer game if you want to, but I think the shorter game actually works better. And for an accessible gateway game, then I think this is probably right at the top of the totem pole for me, if I was to recommend one. So that is Acropolis at number 6. At number 5, I have Rise. So Rise is a game all about climbing tracks. Now that might not sound very interesting, but this game is probably one of the strongest ones I have in my collection when it comes to those domino effect actions. When you do one thing which will trigger another thing, which will trigger another thing. And I always love games like that because they always feel so satisfying. So it almost feels like a roll and write style game put into a board game experience, which I really like. And I love the simplicity of the main action selection, where you have a bunch of these cards drawn out at random, and they go in kind of in order, in a line, and you can select the ones at the beginning of the line which are very cheap, or you can go to the end of the line which are of course much more expensive, and money is tight in this game, but you get a bunch of kind of other benefits as you go. And that is a real cool conundrum, because again, cash flow is not an easy thing to manage in this game. There are so many different plates you're spinning, because if you neglect one track, you might start, losing points and this kind of different things going on. So it really is a game about plate spinning, different options to go for. And again, there's huge, satisfying turns. And I wasn't expecting this game to be as good as it was. And I absolutely am in love with it. And I can't wait to play it some more now that I've spoken about it. So that is Rise at number 5. At number 4, I have Caesar's Empire. So Caesar's Empire is actually a very light game. It's very accessible, very simple in the way that it works. It's a kind of a route building game and a set collection game as you are placing out these pieces of your colour, these legions, these Roman legions, on these different spots on the board and collecting these different tiles. And these tiles will score you either set collection benefits or they'll give you kind of pure points based on the different categories, I suppose. But I love the fact that once you've collected a new tile, you will trace the route back that you've just reached all the way back to Rome at the centre of the board, and for every piece of yours that you pass through, you'll get a point, but also for every piece of another player that you've passed through, they will get a point. So even if it's not your turn, you can end up generating points passively, and I love the way that works. It always feels like you've got your eyes on the board and just rubbing your hands together when people take actions that you've wanted to. This game plays remarkably fast. It's just completely smashing pieces down on the board. That urgency to get to the pieces that you want. Do you want to get a bunch of the same tokens to get the points that way? Do you want to diversify? Do you want to focus on getting these coins to double the points when it comes to tracing the route back? And I love that interaction. It's a complete different level of interaction that I've generally seen in games of this weight. So I think if you like games like Ticket to Ride, but you want something a little bit different and definitely different enough to warrant having both, then Caesar's Empire is a great place to try, or a great game to try. I've never had a bad game of this one. It plays great at 3, 4 or 5 players, so it's quite flexible. Great production, maybe a little bit overproduced, but it does look fantastic when it's on the table. And in terms of that depth, decision space to game length ratio, this is right on the money. So adore this game. That is Caesar's Empire, overlooked massively because it is so good. That is Caesar's Empire at number 4. At number 3, I have Marrakesh. So it wouldn't be a Chairman of the Board video without a mention of Stefan Feld, and this is one of his biggest games that he's made in some time. And it's a style of Stefan Feld game that I tend to really enjoy, and that is being a bunch of mini games held together through a pretty simple action system. And this game implements a cube tower where you're placing these caches in, they're filtering through, and you're drafting them to take a bunch of different actions. Now, if I'm honest, that cube tower doesn't play a huge part. It is a very minor part of the game, but it's a nice little gimmick to play with. But I love the different things you're trying to do here. You're climbing tracks, you're revealing and then committing to these endgame objectives. I love the way there's always a forward momentum here where you're constantly adding caches to your personal player board, making you stronger in all of those different departments on the main board. So you start off making small incremental jumps, and eventually by the end of it, you're making huge turns. That always feels fantastic. It's a bit of a strange one. It's definitely a step apart from the thematic ties. It's a very dry mechanical game, but what else do you really expect from a Feld design? I really like this one. It's a little bit longer than I would like it to be, but that is a very minor criticism because I do think that the 2-hour playtime does warrant the gameplay. It scales well, 2, 3 or 4 players, and it's just one of those games where you can't do everything. And I like the way that those kind of games always keep me coming back for more because I feel like, maybe next time I'll do this instead, or I should have done this, and all these different things are going around in your head, and those games that keep me thinking are always the keepers. So that is Marrakesh at number 3. At number 2, I have Revive. So Revive is a somewhat sandboxy Euro game where you're trying to get as many points as you can from these private objective cards. And what you're doing is you are basically trying to explore this communal map by flipping over these tiles, getting points, revealing new spots to go to, placing your player pieces on these different spots on these hexes, which will let you climb tracks, which will give you kind of little benefits and boosts as you go. And I love the diversity in which what you can do in this game. Do you want to focus on climbing those tracks and getting new technologies that nobody else can use? Or do you really want to focus on exploring? Do you want to go for these public objectives? Do you really want to try and maximize those private objectives and collect these multipliers? So it really does kind of give you a framework on what you can do, and it just leaves you to it. Now, at first, I did find that a little bit confusing because I thought this game would be a bit more on rails than it was. But as I played it more and more, I really do enjoy that idea of, you know what to do, you know how to get points, now go find a way to maximize that. So I really like the way that works. This game has tons of potential to stay in the limelight by injecting new material there, by adding new factions, new mechanisms, because the actual core mechanisms here, or the core gameplay, is so simple as you're just managing this hand of cards, taking actions, tucking them in your little player boards, refreshing them when you need to, and it just comes together so harmoniously. It's a lot of fun to play, and I really do see this one growing more and more for me, and it's definitely warranted that early buzz, I think. I think it's going to have a lot of longevity. I think it's going to be somewhat of an evergreen because it's that good. So that is Revive at number 2. And at number 1, and my favourite game of 2022 is Teletum. So Teletum is the newest Tascini and Luciani T-Series game by Board and Dice, and I'm so grateful that Tascini and Luciani decided to, take a step back and realise that less is sometimes more, because I did feel like the games before this one in the series started to become a bit too cumbersome, a bit too fiddly, and just have too much going on, where that is certainly not the case when it comes to Teletum. And I love the way that they stay true to being a dice drafting game. But the core twist on this game is that when you are drafting these dice communally, you are taking the pip values worth of resources, because every resource is assigned to a different dice colour. But the reverse of that, you are taking as an action strength. So for example, if you were to draft 6 resources, you'd get a strength 1 action. If I was to take 1 resource, then I'd get a strength 6 action. So I love that conflicting mechanism there, and it works exceptionally well. Again, purity is always more. And all you're trying to do is you're trying to travel around this map, erect these trading posts to get points, achieve these public objectives, build churches, collect these little bonus tokens you can do. Another game a bit like Rise, where you can string actions together to a huge degree. It can sometimes be a little bit difficult to track where you've got and how many actions you have left. But for me, that's what I really love. I love those huge, satisfying turns, but all held together through a simple system. And that has Teletum written all over it. So not only is this one of my favourite games of 2022, it's becoming one of my favourite games of all time. It's a game that I can pull off my shelf any single time. It'll take me 2 seconds to re-jog my memory and relearn all the rules, and I can teach it very easily as well. And it still feels fresh, it feels punchy, it feels fun, and it's just everything I want in a midweight Euro. So there we have it. That's my definitive top 10 games of 2022. Let's briefly touch on the top 20. So at number 11, I had Mosaic. So very narrowly missed out to Caesar to making it into the top 10. And we have First Rat at number 12. Then we have Hiroba. So Hiroba is a game that I have reviewed on the channel, actually. It's a hybrid Sudoku area control game that's beautifully elegant, massively overlooked. At number 14, we have Trekking Through History. At number 15, we have the Galileo Project. These are all games I've reviewed. At number 16, I have Heat, Pedal to the Metal. I was quite impressed by that one. 17, Next Station London, which has just been nominated for the Spiel des Jahres. At number 18, I have Lock, which is a trivia style game, or a party style game. At number 19, I have A Universal Truth, a nice little dice drafting multi-use card game. And at number 20, I have Lacrimosa. So there we have it. That concludes the ultimate video. 20 games there, top 10, absolutely fantastic. I hope you have enjoyed the video. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.